And I assure you that Obama's worried about that. Very worried about that. That's why I'm giving a talk tonight about how he's going to create jobs. It's a couple years too late, but I suppose we could say better late than never. Okay, the sources of profit. Okay, now this we are going to talk more about in the second half of the course, so I don't want to belabor this. So I'm just giving you an intro to this. Okay, some basic ideas. We'll get right through this. Okay, what is capital first? And then we'll go through labor, nature, and money, the three sources of profit. But first, what is capital? Capital is three different things at the same time. It is property, the ownership of land, the ownership of businesses, the ownership of financial assets, and so on, or what Marx called the means of production. That is the stuff that industry requires. You own industry, basically. You own the basis of business and production. That's what capitalists do. They have property. Firms are units of property. Capital is also the money that's going to be invested and reinvested. Money or wealth or riches, whatever you want to call it. And it's a stock, and it's also a flow. Now, interesting, I'll talk more about this in another lecture, but if you look at a chart like this, you'll see that wealth, which is the blue, bluish something, and income, which is clearly violet, that wealth is much more concentrated. And this is the top 5%, top 20%. Virtually all the wealth is concentrated in the top 20%. And a great deal of it is concentrated, let's see, percent of total. 60% is in the top 5%. Now, when you look at income figures, which is what the U.S. government puts out all the time, it looks better than that. Doesn't look great, but it looks better. But wealth, which is property, this is stocks, this is land, this is buildings. This is what is capital property, as opposed to your house or your parents' house, if they still have it, which is personal property, which is not for money-making, supposedly. We do a little of that because we're Americans, but and we're all in the market, and we all love it, but that's another lecture. And then, of course, capital is a class. It is a group who have particular amounts of power thanks to their wealth, thanks to their position. And if you don't believe me, you can read a book like Simon Johnson and James Quack's book about how Wall Street controls the regulation of the banks. In case you didn't believe that already. I mean, I don't know where you've been if you don't know that. But Wall Street, see, those guys all become Secretary of the Treasury. That's power. Okay? They don't put me there. Thank God. And then three functions of capital are to invest, to manage, to organize things. And I wish we had time in this course to talk more about business organization, but we're going to kind of give that short shrift, I'm sorry, because there's just so much I can do, and as you know, I already do too much. And they supervise. They boss the workers in order to get the work done. Okay? However, the surplus, the profits they make is more than what they reinvest. And the reward for their management skills, which I'm happy to pay them if they're really good at managers, though most CEOs actually aren't, which is why they turn over so fast. But assuming they are, okay, pay them the big salaries. But a lot of what they're paid in stock options is not salary. It's part of the profit. Okay, so capitalists seek profits or their history. Well, where does profit come from? It is value added. First of all, it's value added. What is it? It's the revenue minus cost. That's what's left over. You pay your workers, you buy your inputs, you buy your machinery, pay your leases on your machinery or your building, and at the end of the day, then you sell your goods and you see what the difference is. And that's your profit. It used to be called value added in the census. I don't know why they dropped that. Various economic theoretical reasons, except that it was nice and clear and crisp because it said it was what was left over basically after you paid your wages. What did the labor add to the value of these goods? Well, you wouldn't buy the labor, you wouldn't pay for the inputs if the value of what you sold weren't greater than the value of what you paid, cost of what you paid. That's business logic. You have to have a surplus. Where does the surplus come from? It comes from the fact that workers produce more value than they cost in wages. Otherwise, you would never do business. I don't say that's so self-evident, it seems to me. But in neoclassical economics, there is no surplus. There is no profit at equilibrium because capitalists are paid a kind of rent or return on their incredibly valuable property that they lend to the workers so that they can work in the factory. That doesn't sound to me like the way it actually works. Actually, capitalists set up a factory, then they hire workers, and if you don't work hard, they fire you. They don't lend their capital to you. It's a kind of nice inversion. Yes? That's a way to look at it in neoclassical theory. And basically you get, Adam Smith has this, but in neoclassical it's kind of formalized that capital is paid for the just return for giving its machinery or its land or its oil into the production process. In the production process, yeah. Now, for anybody who knows anything about oil, it's almost all pure rent. So what do they contribute? What do Saudi Arabia's sheiks contribute? They allow us to pump the oil out of the ground. So with rent of resources, I think people see that. As your rent goes up on your apartment, has your landlord done anything? I mean, there's all kinds of complicated theories about why you should pay the landlord more. But really, if he's paid off his loan, it's pure surplus from you. For the right to occupy a piece of land and a piece of a building. The building's already been paid for. So what are you paying for? The land. And why? Because he owns it and you don't. Or she. Not to be sexist. Capitalism is also a social system. And the only really successful leftist of my generation was Matt Groening at convincing a popular audience that something might be wrong with the U.S. because he invented The Simpsons. The greatest critical show or media or whatever entertainment there is. And of course he has a capitalist. What's his name? What's his name? See, you all know, right? All right. So capitalism is a social system. It isn't just a cold, dead market system, as in conventional economics. And Adam Smith knew that, but neoclassicism forgot about it. It's all about markets. There is no society. We're all just rational people entering the market and doing our market thing. Well, it really isn't like that. Now, capitalism does have an economic logic, but it has a social logic, according to Marx, which is class conflict. So, in Marx's key ideas were that we have a mythology of capital. The capital itself is productive, not human labor. And we lose track of the fact that human labor is what's productive. The wealth of nations, and he rips right off of Adam Smith, saying the wealth of nations appears as this abundance of commodities, of things, as Adam Smith said. Adam Smith was interesting in saying the wealth of nation is manufacturing, not simply agriculture or piling up gold coins. The real wealth is your productive capacity, particularly manufacturing. And of course, he was right. The Industrial Revolution proved everybody else wrong, that if you could raise productivity in manufacturing, you could rule the world, and you could get much better off. And that's what we already talked about in Lecture 2. How much better off the world is because of the Industrial Revolution. How much more powerful certain countries are, and certain people are, and so on. Well, but is it the things, or is it the money, or is the wealth of nation ultimately their productive power? And what does that come from? People, the people who work. And those who don't work live off those who do work. But they're constantly, we could spend a whole day on this, we could spend a week on this, all the excuses for why people who live off the surplus are really, really useful. And people who work are really, really badly behaved and deserve their crappy lives. The same goes for nature, by the way, and with the environmental movement in the last 20, 30 years, there's been a major turnaround in realizing the value of nature, and that nature's surplus is something we use all the time. Yeah, a farmer who employs a horse gets a surplus from the horse. How do you know? Because when the horse can't do the work anymore, and is simply sitting in the barn eating oats, you shoot him, or you sell him to the glue factory. That's what they used to do. The horse has to produce more work than he eats in oats. That's a surplus labor. In that case, it's horse labor. So we're not that worried about it, although some animal rights people are worried about that, because you can work a horse to death, and it's pretty awful. But what about people? The number one thing that goes into all production is people. Okay, so we have three forms. This surplus takes three forms: profit on industry, rent from land, and interest from money. Oh, crap, I'm still going on this. How can I be so slow? Okay, well, let's keep going. Labor and profit. Labor is a creative force of industries. And now I'm going to repeat myself because I shouldn't have said all that off 2 slides. Anyway, it's manual and mental labor. It's all labor, including some management and organizational, technical labor and so on. What do capitalists do besides all those wonderful things about investing and developing productivity? Well, the other thing they do is they hire people, put them to work, and take the surplus. But they don't invest all the surplus. And they hide a lot of it really well, with really expensive paintings on the wall, with beautiful buildings. Why do they need all those buildings, those skyscrapers, for their prestige? And we all know bankers are paid exactly what they're worth. Right? And labor, because it's exploited, does form a class, has opposing interest to capital. This is also what Marx said. Now, most of us don't identify anymore as workers. We'll talk more about that another time. But it's 2/3, 3/4 of all the people are going to go out and you're going to be salaried workers. Probably not going to be piece rate workers, but you're going to be salaried workers. Okay, nature provides the resources, but it provides it for free. When I dig up ore from the ground, I don't pay the earth. I just get it. If I dig up gold in California in 1850, I just get it and suddenly I'm rich for nothing. For a little bit of labor and a whole lot of nature, just putting these beautiful gold things in my hand, gold nuggets in my hand. And farming, it's obvious. The plants grow, you don't do anything, and then you get to harvest them and get all that wonderful solar power out of them. Some miracles of nature. Again, who gets the surplus? Well, whoever controls the fields or the mines or the pipelines or whatever. They get rent. Are landowners a class? Well, some people like Ricardo thought they were. Henry George from San Francisco in the 19th century became world famous, saying that the problem of capitalism was the problem of the rentiers, of the landlords. Ricardo thought the landlords were going to destroy the whole process of accumulation if you let them continue to take their pound of flesh. And so they got free trade in England and wiped out a lot of the old gentry who were living off rents. And then you got a lot of great novels by Jane Austen and others about declining gentry. Okay, keep going. And finally, money. We'll talk more about later. The owners of money, financiers are those who have money. They don't necessarily have factories or anything, but they lend the money out to people who do have factories or who do want to buy a house, and they get interest, which is a cut of the surplus that's going to be produced with their money. Is money useful? It is, if it's put to work. Okay? So we'll talk about that. But it's not useful. It doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't subject to the same theory of where it comes from. Where does interest come from? It comes out of the total surplus. So finally, you conclude section 2 here, myths of modern economics, that there's no profit, no surplus, but there is. That labor is just a cost, and if we just get rid of it, everything will be hunky-dory. And the capital is really the creative force. And you can see this in business press endlessly. That the capitalists are the ones who are given credit for everything. That ain't true. I mean, there are wonderful capitalists like Steve Jobs, but there's a lot of just ordinary guys sitting atop the pyramid, and the money is just pumping out like an oil well. And if you look at well, I'll tell you about CEOs another day. Okay, and exploitation, because there's exploitation, there's antagonism. So you get environmental movements to protect nature from being exploited. You get labor movements to protect labor from being exploited so much. You get anti-bank movements, which I wish we had, but there are some around the world now. And hence you get political economy. Can you read that cartoon? You guys have good eyes, right? Okay. Huh? Right. Okay, so that's the sources of profit. Now, boom, why do I have 2 of those? Why do I have that? Oh, I see. Okay, now we're into the waves. Okay, now this, how capital grows and how the economy grows, you've got to understand that it's not steady. And you don't have to buy my theory of growth and cycles to know this. But otherwise, you can have an exogenous theory that, well, we have business cycles because something goes wrong. Somebody bombs a building somewhere and all hell breaks loose. Therefore, we get a downturn in the year 2001, right? Well, except it was already going down for a year before that. So what's going on? Well, it has to do with cycles. So first, just what are these cycles? The business cycle is recognized as a certain sub-part of economics. Going back to the 1930s, it's talked about business cycles. It used to be, for a while, it was an important subject, then it was kind of forgotten. Now it's had to come back again, as you might imagine, because of what's happening in the world. So you get an upswing, what's called a peak, then a downturn, a trough, and another recovery, and so on and so on. The economy tends to work in these kind of wave-like patterns like the ocean. And you should know, it's very important when you're talking about how an economy is performing, is that are you talking peak to peak? Are you talking trough to trough? Are you talking trough to peak? If you measure growth during this period, an economy will seem to do really well. If you measure it from peak to trough, it'll seem to be doing very badly, which is what we get now. And everybody during recessions is all tearing out their hair and whining and going, oh my God, the sky is falling. And during recoveries, everybody goes, well, this is never going to end. And it always does. Even that's what the market does too. Markets adjust, and you get out of these recessions to some degree automatically. Now I'm going to talk about government policy and macro policy and so on in a later lecture, but there is an automatic mechanism here. It's endogenous to the system. Capital produces the growth, and then it produces the problems that lead to a recession. So just a couple clarifications. In long-term growth, you get a trend, right? Generally, in successful economies like the U.S., it's generally upward. This might be a trend line of growing at 2.5%. There's a long-term growth rate in the U.S. But actual growth wobbles around that. And you can graph it like this, or you can graph it as deviations from trend. A lot of the figures, like this figure here, is deviations from trend. Notice that mostly every quarter you get positive growth. Not so often negative growth, right? But it isn't constant growth. You can see there's a big slowdown here, and an even bigger slowdown here. This is early 90s, early 2000s, right? Then there's another statistical technique that they use, because if you did this month by month, it would be even worse, wiggling around like crazy. You can see my little laser. But you use smoothing between where you combine an average, a moving average of quarters, maybe 3 quarters, 4 quarters, or you talk about annual rates of growth, which are going to be smoother than quarterly. And you get something like this red line that might be slightly smooth, or this line. Here's like GDP 1920 to 1940. You can see it's been smooth. Here's the trend line. There's the Great Depression, the boom of the 20s. But this is clearly smooth. It's not as wiggly as this. Smoothing brings out these kind of the big cycles, the big waves. How do you measure these cycles? Well, there are a variety of indicators. The most common is GDP, which is simply output, a value of total output. But there are other ones, like employment is another one, and orders of capital equipment is another one. Sales is another one. It's not the same. Income is not exactly the same as output, which is interesting. They should be the same, but they're not quite because of measurement difficulties. And so all those are indicators or indexes of performance. There are some indicators that lead the way. The stock market tends to go up before the economy does and go down before the economy does. Unemployment tends to go up late in the cycle and then continue into the next recovery longer. It's called a lagging indicator. Stock markets are a leading indicator. So there's a whole series of possible indicators, and they don't all line up. This is a graph of consumer confidence versus payroll employment. And you can see the red line here. Does it lead? It seems to lead a little bit, the black line, doesn't it? Yeah, I don't know. Here, see, black's going up. No, then it's lagging. Whoop, then it takes off ahead. So it's pretty imperfect, right? Well, all these indicators are more or less imperfect. So they often use multiple indicators. But there's some really lousy indicators. Stocks actually have a very poor relationship to the real economy. Even though every time you turn on the radio, including the sports channels I listen to, you get stock market reports as if this was the only thing anybody cared about. You'll hardly ever get unemployment reports, maybe once a month. But 3 times a day on KNBR, 6 times a day on KNBR, you can get stock market reports. Because God forbid you're watching your stock portfolio, all you football players. Well, they are, but I'm not. And some of the data is so lousy that it has to be revised every 6 months. So, for instance, the first 2 quarters of 2011 looked better for a while. They looked like the growth was up in maybe the 2%, and then it got downgraded to less than 1% in the last quarter. Or in the first quarter, and the second quarter was 1.6%, really crappy. And then you get headlines, but nobody ever notices those after-effect headlines other than a few economists and stock traders. And this is why the Fed doesn't, they never know. Is the recovery happening or isn't it? You're depending on leading indicators to tell you, and it's a very imperfect science. But what you can rely on is that the business press and the government will always BS about this. Everything's coming up roses. It's always better than it looks. Oh, the market just had a correction today. A correction means it fell 300 points. But they call it a correction because that sounds better than the bottom dropped out, right? So language is important here. And reading the tea leaves in a certain way is important. And there are 2 things I want to bring your attention to of how to lie with statistics. One is that the official NBER, which is National Bureau of Economic Research, measurement of a recession is you don't get a recession unless you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. So, early 2000s, there aren't 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. But if you look at this overall chart, wouldn't you say this was a recession? Wouldn't you say this was a serious downturn? I think any sensible person would. It doesn't have to be negative to be a downturn. Negative is really bad in modern economies. And if you look back at my chart, what it's saying is that, if you look at the deviations from trend, these are all downturns when it goes below the trend. But in our official speak, the only thing that's an official recession is the tip of one of these, maybe. And then, wow, the economy's out of recession. Everything's great. Of course, unemployment's still 9.5%, 12% in California. But we're not in recession. We're not in the Great Recession anymore, according to the official statistics. So now people say, oh, maybe it's a double dipper. It's not a double dipper. If you look at the employment indicators, it's still the Great Recession. It still stinks. And then they like to mix leading and lagging indicators. I love that. Because if the stock market recovers in 2010, everybody goes, see, we're out of recession. But the employment hasn't. And then when the stock market dies, they say, oh, but unemployment hasn't gone up yet. So we must still be okay. And yet, it's coming. And guess what? The stock market started running trouble this year, and job figures are crappy again, or the worst they've been for a while. Okay, upswings, downswings. Upswings, you see rising sales, falling inventories, rising orders for capital goods, rising capacity use, and most of all, profit rates. Here's the profit rate on manufacturing capital in the 90s, from, I guess I can't fuzzy here, 92 to 2001 maybe, 2002, 2001. And you can see it peaks in the mid-90s. So here's a good upturn, profits are going up, then they start going down. The official economic recession, however, doesn't happen until way out here. Because economic activity is still doing well even as profits start down. And here you see it in this chart, which goes from 92 to 2010. So we're interested in this bit here. Okay, so the profits did drive up this boom, which then, that's the 96 Asian crisis. Did drive this boom, and then whoop, it fell off in 2001, 2002. Okay, this is GDP. So GDP didn't fall until well after profits. But it did fall. And the profits when the profits go down, investment goes down. Now, when you get an upswing, you get this virtuous cycle of, they're investing, they're putting new technology in place, they're learning as they put in the technology and improving it, everything's looking good. You're hiring new workers and paying them, and even maybe letting their wages go up. And the workers are learning, they're not, absenteeism goes down and so on, and productivity starts to go up, everything's looking really good. And then you get Keynes's money multiplier, because everybody spends the money down at the grocery store, and then that pays grocery store workers, and then they spend their money down at the 5 and dime, and that pays 99-cent dollar store workers, and so on. And circulates a couple of times. However, during the boom, you start to run into a little problem. The most typical early problem is bottlenecks. That the boom is going so great that demand starts to outrun supply in various markets. One of the reasons wages go up in a boom is because